I'd love to just move on now and ask you a little bit about your teacher, Philippe Gaulier, who will incidentally be teaching a masterclass at your school in end of August, September this year?
That's correct, yeah.
I'm very interested in hearing about how your association with Monsieur Gaulier began.
It's easy. After graduating from university in England, I went as an innocent young thing to a festival in France where I studied with a woman by the name of Monica Pagneux, who at that time, this was in 1990, at that time was near the end of her career as one of the preeminent movement teachers of physical theatre techniques in Europe. I'd never heard of Monica, but I showed up at this festival and I was shoved into the class and I just did it. And she was a Feldenkrais specialist, but she'd adapted everything in the direction of theatrical study, and she was absolutely fabulous teacher. I studied with her for close to 3 months. It was a long event that I was part of. At the end of that, having had my mind kind of rearranged by her teaching, I said, what do I do now? And she said, go and study with Philippe Gaulier.
What a beautiful segue for you in your training.
Yeah, and I'd never heard of Philippe. Subsequently, of course, I learned everything about him that I could, but at that time it was a bolt from the blue. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And furthermore, Monica's training was, as I say, kind of a body training. Philippe's specialty is clowning. He does a lot of other things, but so I wasn't even expecting really to go and train in the world of clowning. I just thought that I was showing up for a class with an influential teacher. So lo and behold, it began. Philippe kind of organizes his curriculum in segments. You can study with him for a month at a time, and then you can go away and come back, similar to what we described. So I studied 2 classes with him, one in games, theatrical games, which he calls le jeu, the game in French, and the other was in clowning. I was terrible.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Yeah. Many students are terrible in Philippe's eyes, but the power of the, I would say pedagogy, but it's a little more than that, the philosophy, was just intense. His influence was very strong. He's an amazing teacher. He's a wonderful guy.
Did you find it very rigorous training?
Yeah, but it's not rigorous in so far. You're not exhausted physically by the training. I've done other work that happened at the Lecoq School, where Philippe came from, is much more taxing on the body.
Because they do a lot more physical grounding work. Lecoq.
Exactly. But no, Philippe's work was intense in its marriage of the psychological, the emotional, and the imaginative, and all driven by this sort of spirit of playfulness, which is part of his legacy to all of us.
And also giving that a fresh slant to the notion of playfulness, particularly if you're coming from a very sort of strict codified acting background.
Yeah, that's
playfulness has a slightly different connotation and application, but you're relearning the notion of play.
That's exactly right. And
with Philippe.
He's very strong on the idea that there's no need to access your internal pain as an actor. The only obligation you have is to source your imagination and celebrate your sort of creative self. And he's sort of comically dismissive of other schools of thought which demand, an internal process.
Which can be a bit conflicting for some acting methodologies that are still embedded in the internal journey.
That's right, yeah. And even on some of his publicity materials and his website and so on, he loves kind of jabbing at Stanislavski and Strasbourg and all that stuff.
Well, he wouldn't be the only one out there doing that too.
That's very true.
But it's also respectful too.
Yeah.
It's not about tearing down the walls.
No, he's a provoker. I mean,
it's a provocative.
Yeah, that's right. But he belongs to a genuine tradition which has its roots, that go back a long time.
Yeah, and that's what I'm loving hearing you say that, because you're not the only person who's studied with Monsieur Gaulier who has said that his approach is deeply rooted in the tradition and preserving that tradition.
That's right.
But not stifling it and making it leaden with rules 2 centuries ago.
No, he's very clear that it's really an attempt to just catalyze the individual, and you know, many of his students have gone on to be extremely successful household names in the entertainment industry.
Yes, indeed.
And they all, in reflection or on reflection, they will all credit Philippe not for a system, but rather for a kind of an invitation to open their own Pandora's box of creative inspiration.